Ruthie Friedlander from InStyle.com, and I am here with Sheryl Connelly. And tell us what you do, Sheryl.
So I am a futurist for Ford Motor Company, and it's a really exotic title that's kind of hard to describe. I find the easiest way to explain it is to tell people what I don't do. And I do not predict the future.
Okay, that's disappointing.
It is disappointing. However, the reality is that every company has to do long-term planning and strategy, and oftentimes they're building on assumptions that they think everyone shares or that they think are foolproof. And my job is to slow down the conversation, to push back on the status quo and say, what if your assumptions are wrong? What happens to our plans? And so it's actually, I think, a really helpful function inside of any organization, automotive or not, to say, like, hey, what are the things that could go wrong and how might we leverage or prepare for them?
And why would an automotive company as big as Ford need a futurist like you?
Well,
other than the fact that you're just great to be around.
Well, thank you. It's something that dates back to the days of Henry Ford, and he had famously said at one time, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And so in his own way, he was a futurist that had to try to imagine this solution that nobody was asking for. And today it takes 3 to 5 years to actually develop an idea and execute it against the marketplace. So in some way, shape, or form, every single person who works for Ford is asking, what do we need to do 3 to 5 years from now? And I just help aid in the discussion. And so I give them prompts by saying, have you noticed this trend? We should consider about how attitudes are shifting. If we look over here, we might get some insights. And the great part about it is that I'm not the person who has to decide what we do with it as a company.
You just serve up the info.
I serve up the info, and then the subject matter experts closest to it, the designers, the engineers, the marketing team, they take the insights and then run away with it. And
so some of the information that you served up is really about trends, which is cool because we talk a lot about trends here at InStyle, but you're not talking about shoes and jackets. You're talking about things like self-care and unplugging from digital. I want to talk a little bit about self-care and why you think that is such a big trend right now.
So we're constantly connected. I mean, we start talking about a trend that we call information addiction 13 years ago. And actually, when we titled it that, we did it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it has since then become an actual diagnosis.
Oh, yeah.
And the sad part about it is that it has opened and untapped human potential in ways that we could never have imagined. We can do more, we're more spontaneous, we're better informed, but it also came at a great price, right? So we're constantly distracted, our attention spans are shrinking, and it's become very commonplace to no longer maintain eye contact with someone you're speaking with.
Oh, interesting.
It's okay. And then even we did a survey that 50% of millennials said that they had entered a relationship via text. So it also can create this barrier.
For sure.
So we start to explore, what's the downside? I mean, we readily admit that technology has done wonderful things.
Absolutely.
But at what cost? So I love this stat that came out 2 years ago that said human beings have a shorter attention span than goldfish. I mean, who knows how they actually measured that? But in our gut, we feel it. We're like, well, yeah, I am a little bit scatterbrained. And I think we have convinced ourselves that we're effective multitaskers, but we actually do more harm than good when you try to take on too many things. So I think this is why this unplug movement has come about. People are saying, there is the fear of missing out, but what about the joy of missing out? What about the idea of disconnecting and trying to return to some place of calm and serenity?
And so when you kind of approach your team about this at Ford, what do they do with this information? So when you go to them and say, self-care, this is really important, if they agree and they get on board with you and you're like, you're right, how do they kind of take those trends and implement them into the decisions that they're making?
So for a long time inside the company, technology was all about more.
Of course.
And that's what the marketplace was asking for. We couldn't get enough of this kind of constant stimulation. But we have reached a tipping point, and people are saying, less is more. I find that I'm always agitated. I find that I'm restless. I find that I am irritable in ways that I wasn't before I became constantly addicted to.
I certainly feel that way about myself.
And so do you find ways that you try to shut it down and you go, you know what, I've got to turn it off. I have to get away. And so inside of our vehicles, our system that connects your phone or your tablet to the entertainment system also features a do not disturb button. So you can shut out the noise. And so some years ago we started talking about, it can be a tool of productivity, an office on wheels, if you will, but could it also be a sanctuary, this place that you decompress, where you shut up all the noise and you kind of get back to center? I mean, there are occasions, it's not often, that I drive in complete silence, just when I feel like my head is swimming with too many ideas that I just cannot take one more intrusion.
And depending on where you live, I mean, you can be in your car more time than you're not. I mean, I know people in California tend to have this road rage or get super anxious when they're in their cars, and I think it's super interesting to kind of think about, you know, technology being this great thing, but also how do we work with that and make sure that we're finding solutions. And I think that is so cool that a company like Ford is thinking about that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in the context, it's of course not just, you know, constantly being connected, but what are we hearing? Like, more and more people are telling us they find listening to the news extremely stressful.
Right.
I think we found a stat that said like just under 15% of people admitted to actually canceling family or friend functions because they wanted to avoid what they thought would be tensions of political conversations.
Interesting.
So I think it's an interesting time. And then you intersect that with this moment in time where there are advances in medicine and technology to better understand the brain. And so we realize, you know, that meditation is a really powerful tool. Now, here's something that's been around for thousands of years,
right.
But if you want to reduce your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, heal faster, and become a more deep thinker, then start meditating.
So when we, at the fashion magazines, look for trends, we go to Paris, London, and Milan. That's where we find out trends. So you have all these amazing stats. Where are you finding all of this stuff?
So it's reading. It's really reading. Like, just like you guys go to these epicenters of fashion,
yes.
that are on the cutting edge, and you start to notice patterns. You know, I don't get to go to those great places. A lot of mine's done desktop reading, but you're noticing patterns. You keep seeing things. You know, you might see it in product offerings or marketing communications. This meditation and just the idea about well-being started to well up, and I started noticing it when I started noticing how popular or mainstream mindfulness had become.
Yeah.
And then we took a step back and we said, well, what's really behind that? And we're having a crisis in terms of mental health. And I always think how interesting it is, because we all know people that would never dream of skipping a day at the gym,
mm-hmm.
you know, or cheating on their diet. But the same people who try to get by with less than 8 hours of sleep a day. And you really cannot have a fit body without a sound mind. And so I think we start to understand that those things are interrelated. And so if you need to find ways to actually nurture the mind. So self-care, some of our research talks about, like, what are the forms of self-care? Like 44% of the people we spoke to in a recent survey said yoga. Yoga is my version of self-care. Some people say
44%.
44%.
Wow.
39% some sort of therapy, you know, so maybe talk therapy. But my favorite, my people, we say it's spa treatments. And
that's my people too. A nice 45-minute massage, Shibui Spa, if anyone out there wants to get me a gift card.
And forget 45, because that's just a teaser. You really need 90 minutes. If
right.
you really want
to, and if you can get a massage in a car, if you're not the driver, maybe that's a good suggestion you want to pitch to Ford. I don't know.
We actually have massaging seats in the driver and passenger seat. Now they're not like shiatsu.
Yeah.
It is. What happens is that your body gets really fatigued. I mean, you sit in the same spot and you just cramp up. And so what happens is that the seat moves, and so it's got bladders of air and different rollers. So they try to keep the blood flow circulating.
Oh, fascinating. And, you know, I just love that that's the kind of thing that you think wellness, and how would a car company and wellness go? I mean, you can't do yoga in your car, but you say it, and then all of a sudden you can get a massage in your car, and that's just so fabulous.
You can. And there are other things. Like, you know, it used to be that there was like a lot of offloading of chemicals. Like, you know, the new car smell?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that has a lot to do with what materials you're using.
Right.
And so we try really hard to make sure our materials are more organic or even recycling. One fashion thing that we do is, like, we buy remnants from companies that make sweaters or blue jeans, and we recycle that material and we make it the insulation for our doors. But when you start to repurpose material like that, you can avoid a lot of the petroleum-based chemicals and the offloading that goes with it. So, I mean, some people are so sensitive to it that, like, it gives them a headache when they get in the car.
No, and that kind of attention to reusable goods and sustainability is also trending in fashion. So clearly that's something that is important to people no matter what their interests are, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and, you know, I think people, I love the conversation that's taking place in fashion because I think they're a leader in it. For a very long time when it came to automotive and you talked about sustainability, all anyone wanted to talk about was miles per gallon. But there are so many other ways to be green. And so it's like using those recycling materials. You know, we grow soy and mushrooms to help create plastics. We even did a program with Heinz Ketchup where we were experimenting with the tomato skins to turn them into plastic wiring harnesses. I mean,
That's amazing.
There's no limit. You know, we have a whole team dedicated to how we might try to incorporate those things into the production. And nobody, you know, most people don't know it, but when you run across it, you feel better, right?
Yeah.
About your ownership of the vehicle.
Well, Sheryl, I love when you're here. I always learn something new. I mean, we talked about tomatoes and everything in between. So thank you so much for being here. And next time I hope to hear about all the new trends that we should be looking towards.
Maybe we should meet at the spa.
Yes, definitely. Next time at the spa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyway.